So specific things can be done better and certainly faster with AI.
Today, I'm speaking with Jakob Nielsen, one of the original pioneers of usability and user-centered design.
Ideation is free because you ask AI, give me one idea. No, don't ask AI for one idea, ask it for 10 ideas.
With 42 years in the field, he's influenced everything from the earliest mainframe interfaces to today's AI-driven systems.
We should embrace it for two reasons, very selfish for our own sake. That's the only way you're going to have a job in 5 years, but also for the sake of humanity.
He co-founded Nielsen Norman Group, authored countless foundational books and articles, and continues to shape how we think about the future of design. In this episode, Jakob shares a candid and urgent perspective on where design is heading, the risks of AI denial, and why agency, not just tools, will define the next generation of designers. Jakob, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. It's always exciting to have someone of your caliber on the podcast. Now, you don't really need an introduction. You've been in design for, 42 years? You've run one of the most...
42 years, yes. Yeah, exactly.
A long time. So, I imagine you've seen more change in the design space than anyone. You've run one of the most successful and well-known design consultancies, and you've done so much for the space. So, yeah, once again, thanks for joining me. I am so interested to delve into your thoughts of what's happening at the moment. It's not like the first time that things have changed in design. So where did you want to kick it off?
Well, I mean, if you want to look at the history, certainly when I started, it was actually the very early days of the PC business starting. So it was really, enterprise companies were still dominated by mainframes, really. So that's how old I am. But that's how old, I mean, the field is as well, because we were a few people, not very many, but we were a few people working on usability and user interface design at the time, and mostly for mainframe systems for big enterprises. And then the first revolution that came out was the PC revolution. Like people had their own computer, much higher usability than any mainframe could ever do. Then we got, and the graphical user interface came along with that. I mean, there were actually text-based, like DOS before then, but the graphical user interface was the big revolution from my perspective, from a user interface perspective. Then we got the web revolution, the .com revolution. That was huge. And then the mobile, which actually, in my personal opinion, is not as big as the others, but it was still big as well. So those are at least three really big changes. And now, we have AI, and that I actually think is even bigger because AI is changing not just kind of as particular one aspect, but it's really changing basically everything. And if we look at it just from a usability perspective, a user interface design perspective, it's flipping around the locus of control, or like who is commanding the interface. And so all the interfaces I was describing, mainframe, DOS, Windows-based systems, Macintosh, GUI, graphical user interfaces, websites, mobile phones, all of the smartphones, all of these are based on command-based interaction, right? So the system will show you some screen, or actually in DOS they wouldn't show anything except a character, but they would basically show you a screen, and then you can like click on it or type in or speak to it. It doesn't really matter what the mode is, but you can basically give it a command, say, do this, delete this file, make this text bigger, whatever it is you want to do. And then the computer will do it. And that's the beauty of computers, is that they do what they're told. It's also the downside of computers because they do exactly as they're told. And users don't know what they need or what the commands even are or how to use the commands and so forth. So there's a lot of usability problems in that command-oriented interaction style. Anyway, with AI, we're flipping this because now with AI, the user doesn't say, make this bigger, make this smaller, make this yellow. I mean, you can, but that's not the main way. The main way you use AI is to say, I want this result. So AI is intent-based, goal specification. It's not command-based. It's not step by step. The AI figures out what the steps are. And so that's very, very different. And that means we now have to design for enabling that intent. And again, so some people might say, oh, well, now we're done with all this usability problem. But no, we are not, because you still have the problem about how to articulate your intent. And most people are really bad at that. And I think a lot of us more kind of intellectual people, I think anybody who are listening to this podcast, I think they're by definition too much of an intellectual compared to the general population. So we are relatively articulate, some more than others, but still we are based on the ability to think about what we want and then output what we want in some kind of description. That's kind of one way of defining design. So that's where we're all good at that, but most people are not. And so this sounds beautiful. You can just have a prompt and say what you want, but actually saying what you want is kind of difficult. And so we have now, for the last 2 years, we've had some good AI systems. We've been through kind of many steps of iteration on their user interfaces, and I think they're already better than they used to be. But that said, I still don't think they are at all near where they need to be. And this is where I really point the finger like right at the audience, because if you are a designer audience, you have collectively, not individual people, but collectively, this profession has really abandoned its responsibility to the world in terms of contributing to AI and making it better, having better usability. I think you have a lot of people in user experience who are kind of like in AI denial, almost like, I don't really want that. I want my old way. I know how to do things. But guess what? That's going away. Whether or not you like it, it is going away. But more important, you have billions of people going to use the new world of computers, and we have to design it to be better. So we can't just like sit in a corner and sulk and like, I want to take my ball and go home. You have to play with the other kids, and you have to play with the way technology is going.
Love it. Sit in the corner and sulk. Yeah, you're right. Like ChatGPT is great, or so any AI platforms, but they're not the most user friendly. Like if I give it to my mum, she can't find her way through it really. So it's not there where it needs to be just yet. So let's talk about designers sitting on their hands, and like everyone talks about loving the craft and just wanting to do design, right? But AI is an amplifier. It's going to help people move faster, move forward quicker. Like where are the issue points that you see with design right now? They're not stepping up to the plate when it comes to helping design how AI is going to be in the future, but they are sort of resisting it as well and going, I don't want to get involved in this. Because like for me, like I can see the future of if you're not getting with the times and AI, you are going to be out of a job at some point to someone that does incorporate AI into their job. So like where does a designer need to start? Like what are their risks? And has like you've talked about it in the past about this happening in the .com era. Like where's the relevance in that?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's in many ways a little bit similar. So I see history is not repeating itself identically, but it's rhyming. History rhymes. It's similar things happening again. And it was the same back then because websites were being built originally by pure technologists, because just making something get on the internet was difficult. I remember those days. And then secondly, once it started to be like, okay, companies have to have websites, then they started being designed mainly by advertising agencies who knew how to make kind of glossy brochures, but didn't know how to make interactive things, right? And that's the definition of a website, is that it's an interactive way of presenting your brand to the customers. It's not a passive way like a brochure or a billboard or a magazine ad or any of those type of things. So those people who knew how to make very beautiful magazine ads made good looking but terrible usability websites. And so that's a little bit what we're seeing again here. We're seeing a lot of emphasis on technology and a little emphasis, not really so much, but a little emphasis on sort of various types of almost kind of called philosophy, or like kind of pondering what it is with a new type of intelligence, which is interesting but not very useful. So what's useful is to, just the same as it's always been, to watch people do their work or their play if it's for entertainment, and then see what are the stumbling blocks, how can we make it better. But I think in terms of AI and design, there are kind of two sides to this. And the first is what we sort of been talking about now, which is the design of AI. And there's a lot of tools, there will be more. And so we need to make those better. And then the second thing is to use AI as a leverage point in the field itself, right? So it's not just for users, it's also for designers. It's for both. It's a universal technology that's for everybody, and it's changing how everything is being done. And again, I want to say there's like two ways to think about that as well. So we can kind of like divide up this decision tree, because the first thing is the kind of short term. By short term, I think maybe 2-3 years, something like that. And that's what we can say we will use AI to improve the efficiency or possibly the quality, but at least the efficiency of the things we're already doing. So specific things can be done better and certainly faster with AI. You can get a lot of draft designs up very, very quickly. Then you have to work on refining them. But you can get ideation. I used to say ideation is free, because you ask AI, give me one idea. No, don't ask AI for one idea. Ask it for 10 ideas, right? Because it takes 2 more seconds and you have 10 ideas. I mean, that's what we didn't do in the old days, where getting a lot of ideas required a lot of people sitting around a meeting room table for hours, and that was very expensive. But now it's free, basically, or design alternatives. Make me all these mock-ups, and again, they're not going to be perfect, but they're going to, and you have to discard most of them, but you get a lot of them for free. So that's augmenting the current work process. And that, I think, is very clear, because we have a lot of tools already, more coming out by the day. AI is getting more powerful by the day. You can now do videos we couldn't do half a year ago. You can do images that have sort of somewhat correctly spelled text. It's not 100%, but like typography is sort of getting there, which a year ago, you couldn't do that at all. So these things are getting better and better by the minute, really. But then the second point, and that's more the medium term, and by that I mean maybe 3 to 10 years from now, and that is changing the work processes to really take advantage of these new capabilities, and also changing the organization as well. Because one of the things I'm predicting for the future is what I call it pancaking, which is kind of like flattening out of the hierarchies. Because go back to my previous point, AI makes us much more efficient. So productivity goes up, up, up. Well, if productivity goes up, not by like 20%, like if you just do one thing now, but if we do everything, and with the AI, we will have in, let's say, 3 years, which is much better. Then productivity may go up by, let's say, 10 times. And so I predict that we'll have a team of 10 people will in 3 years be able to do what 100 people do now. And so once you, so when you shrink the team that much, you gain enormous efficiency by less communication overhead, by less management overhead, by just executing. And so that's one of the reasons I believe that we'll get so much more good design done, because we will be able to do it. But it also means we have to organize things differently as well with these smaller teams.
No, I definitely think that's where it's going. So when you think of a product team, which is where the efficiency gains are going to be had, like, yeah, it's clear you usually engineer led, so that's going to minimize. You're probably going to have one principal engineer that's more QAing the code that's coming through from the AI. What do you think a product team is going to be made up of? Do you think design is going to be a very integral part of that team and take a product role?
I actually think so, because let's say go back to my point before about AI being intent-based, goal-specific, outcome specification. And so in the old days, implementation was the big barrier. And coming up with figuring out what should be done was the smaller part of a project, and then doing it was the bigger part of it, or implementing it was the bigger part of the project. It turns out with AI, at least for now, that the number one use case for AI is actually engineering and programming, development. So those people are being, I talked about designers being more productive, but those engineers are being like extremely much more productive, right? And that's great. I mean, seeing it from the UX perspective, it means that we've always had so many ideas of things we would like to do, but they were always too difficult to do, so they didn't get done. But now they'll be cheaper to do, so more of these things will be done. But I think the balance between the two parts is a very simplistic view of product development, but there are two parts to it, right? What should be done, and then doing it. And so the more doing it becomes easier, the more important it becomes to then do the right thing and to have the right intent, the right goal, figuring out what customers needs, figuring out better solutions to these problems. So I do predict that the balance, I don't think this balance is going to completely skew. So you have like 10 designers for every one programmer. It used to be like we had one
Yeah.
UX person for every 10 implementation people, but it may be like it becomes about the same. So that would be and that may not happen in 5 years. That may be sort of a 20-year future instead, because a lot of these changes do take time, particularly when we're talking about organizational change, right? You have companies that are set up to work in the old way. There are many layers of management, and I'm predicting, fewer layers of management because of this pancaking phenomenon. But those reorgs are going to take their time, and I don't have the prescription saying this is how you run your team in 10 years. These are all the job titles and responsibilities, whatever. That we'll have to figure out during that period. What I'm predicting is very, very large change. And also, if I'm going to talk to any kind of younger people in the audience, I think that in the old days, it used to be the case that hierarchy was very important for people's careers, that you had to like claw your way up the management ladder, right, to be seen as kind of better and better and be promoted. And there'll be a little of that because there's always have to be somebody who's kind of lead and organize and make things synchronized. But less and less and less so with these smaller and smaller, more high-powered teams. So the management ladder is not going to be the main way ahead for two reasons. First of all, there are not going to be many levels to climb. And secondly, because there are going to be fewer of those jobs, most people will not get them. And so that shouldn't be your ambition, or you shouldn't feel like if I don't get to be like a director, I'm a big failure in my job, in my career. No, you can pursue other paths towards more skill-based expertise, and also maybe domain-specific expertise as well. Because another thing I'm certainly predicting is that with all these things becoming cheaper, both in implementation and design, both becoming much cheaper, that means that this saying, software is eating the world, which is not mine. This is Mark Andreessen who said that. But he said that several years ago, and that has already been somewhat true, but it will be much more true in 10 years when software will be so much easier to do. So software is eating the world, but then who's eating software? And that's design. And so as well. So there will be much more design done in many, many more industries, many, many more companies. And so that's one of the things that I think people should consider is you may specialize yourself in how to do good product design for very specialized purposes, niche type of markets that your company can dominate or be one of a few that serve that. And of course, there will be AI-enabled tools, obviously, 10 years from now. But they still have to be designed, and so that still remains. That remains, I think, a very glorious and very promising career direction.
Yeah, like we work with quite a lot of enterprises, and they might have 200 designers in their teams at the moment. And do I think they will in 2-3 years' time? No, most likely they're going to have half that, if not less. But I do think design becomes more accessible to businesses that haven't necessarily used design in the past, because now they don't have big engineering teams. They can have a designer come in and actually validate things from the start rather than start building something and then try and validate it afterwards, which seems to be the way.
Exactly. So when I say, that we can maybe produce about 10 times as more in 10 years as we do now, right? So for any given project, you can scale back number of people to 10% of what it used to be. But for any given company, they will now have more projects. But even so, big companies might still scale back. But then all these mid-sized and small companies that right now just cannot afford it at all. They're too small. I mean, if you have a 20-person company, you're not going to have a design team. I mean, that's unless you're a design agency, but a normal company would not. But that's perfectly likely to be the case in 10 years and certainly in 20 years. So I get people worry a lot, I think, about unemployment. And I think maybe in some other professions, that's a reasonable worry. I think specifically when we talk about design, I actually don't think so. And the reason is that it's so underserved right now that even that serving the same market with fewer people, yes, but there will be a 10 times bigger market. And that's where the other 90% of the people will go.
All right, let's talk about that, because yes, design's not going anywhere. But if you're a designer and you're not getting with the current trend and being AI enabled, you will find yourself out of a job. So let's talk about that, because design something like, obviously we talked about it a little bit already, but people are maybe resisting change right now. How quickly do you think this is going to be? Is this going to be in the next? Because like I mentioned this earlier, we work with like enterprises. Enterprises have only just green-lighted some use of AI in most cases, which mean majority of designers aren't using anything. Um, they're using things outside of the sort of red tape of the businesses, but they're not formally being trained. But that kind of becomes the risk to their job, because in 2 years' time, this enterprise is going to go, well, we actually only need half the designers, but we actually need different designers, because the ones that we've got don't actually have the skills that we need anymore. So like, how do you get around that as a risk? Because if you're working in an enterprise right now, you're probably not getting the skills that you need, and you're not working on the projects to get the actual real-time experience. What do you do?
Oh, that's a very good and very sort of scary point. I think there is again an analogy from history, which is it used to be the case that people would bring their own Macintosh into work with them when they were working in one of those places that only had text-based computers, and so people would bring a Mac because that's what they would had, as we kind of know now, is much superior for a lot of tasks, and so they would just have their own and bring it in. And luckily, AI is actually much cheaper than Macintosh used to be expensive. I remember buying my first one when I was an assistant professor, which is not a high-paid job, and it was a big chunk of my budget to buy, a graphical user interface computer. But that again, that's 40 years ago. But now you can get an AI subscription for $20 for the cheap one and $200 for the US dollars for the expensive one, and so that's not really that bad. So I think if you work in a place where the companies should pay for these tools. But in case they don't, I would just say go ahead and get your own, because it's really it's kind of an unemployment insurance against getting unemployed, because it's just guaranteed that in 3 to 5 years, we have to remember one thing, which is that AI is evolving at a dizzying pace, very, very fast. I just talked about before that we can now do the type of videos we couldn't do half a year ago. We can do the type of typography we couldn't do half a year ago, still with some flaws. Half a year from now or a year from now, it'll probably going to be close to perfection. In 3 years, I bet you that AI will do better typography than almost any human designer, maybe like the top 10 really geniuses, but the normal designer, AI will do better than them. And the same will be true for a lot of these other kind of more very specific kind of so-called hard skills of like make this thing. And so again, there's sort of a common metaphor being used in Silicon Valley, which is you've got to skate to where the puck is, will be going, not where it is now. And so you look at AI now and people will love to say, oh, it cannot do this, that, and the other thing. But honestly, compared with what people said 2 years ago, AI couldn't do this, that, and the other. It couldn't draw a hand with 5 fingers. They will always draw 6 fingers, right? Well, now it's very rare you get a hand with the wrong number of fingers from an image tool. And this is a very simple example, but I mean, they are just improving. So look back only 2 years, which is a very short time in human history, or even in technology history, it's a very short time, and see how far it's come. Then look ahead 2 years and think about it's going to be that same or possibly even more, because the investment is accelerating dramatically, because we're kind of at this level now where there's a lot of business value in using AI, which means a lot more money is being brought into it. And I mean, right now when we're recording this, sort of big news is like Facebook, or Meta, as they're called, Mark Zuckerberg, is like pouring billions of dollars into his
A team, wasn't it?
But the others are as well, which is kind of the point, because any one of them can easily fail and ship a bad product. This has happened many times already. But the history really shows that they go up, 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 up. One lab ships an improvement, the other guys will have it 2 months later, and it just keeps going up. And so I think ahead 3 years and just think about what it's going to be, and then think ahead 10 years. And that's why I'm thinking. I mean, we will have super intelligence. We will have AI that's capable of feats that are so beyond anything we can even kind of imagine right now, because it still have to be invented. But the evolution is very, very clear, and so that means that companies, as you point out, companies will make that turn, and that I've again seen many times over. Right? I mean, in the beginning, when we were in that mainframe time, all the enterprises had big mainframe systems, and like the Mac was a toy. Um, yeah, that's true for a while, and then there was like a turning point where companies recognize, oops, we got to have graphical user interfaces, or we will be like a dinosaur, so far behind. And then they got what I call a GUI panic. They got, oh, we got to learn this. And again, as you point out, the existing designers, they didn't have a lot of designers back in those days, but whoever they were who were good at doing kind of text-based screen layouts were not necessarily very good at doing graphical user interfaces. And the same happened actually with the web, where in the beginning websites were really toys. They couldn't do very much. They were too slow, blah, blah. Yeah, that's all true. But bandwidth kept accelerating. People got from slow modems to sort of what was called fast modems, which was not really that fast, but they were like 4 times faster, to broadband, which was not really true broadband, but it was kind of like chugging along, to now we have real broadband. And again, over a relatively small number of years, AI is moving faster than those things. And so the people who said, oh, the websites are just for the geeks, and it's sort of for physics labs to get websites. It's not for major big brands. No, it's like nowadays, no company is going to run without a website. So I feel completely confident that change is going to happen. And then, as you said, yeah, and the people have to be ready for that, because it is a skill, just as anything else. And you have to know how to use AI. You have to know what it's good and bad at. You have to know a bunch of different tools. Now, the specific tools are probably going to be changing somewhat over these next 10 years, just as they were for like web design. But that said, again, the designer is not defined by his or her tools, but rather by their ability and talent. But the talent is kind of like supported by the tools. And so you can change from one tool to another tool. If you know what you're doing, it's like, okay, you're going to spend another day on learning a few different things. But the real point is like knowing how to achieve things, not if it's a command that's in the upper left or the lower right corner of the screen. I mean, that you can learn quickly if you have like any brain. So that's not my concern. My concern is that it's new workflows, and we don't even actually really know those workflows yet. They have to be evolved and developed. But yeah, so what I would say is that if you're in a place that's really AI resistant, first of all, that's not going to last long. But while it is, you have to position yourself for that future anyway. And so then I think, then the only advice would be like do kind of hobby projects, do it on your own. Spend those $20 that should have been a company expense, but spend it out of your own pocket instead.
Yeah. Now, I think in one of your articles you wrote about potentially looking at maybe repositioning your career and starting to work with startups or small businesses that actually use AI, which I think is a great idea. Like all of my clients are pretty much enterprise, and I know the amount of AI projects that are being run in enterprises. So going to a place that are AI first or AI literate and letting you play with tools and running projects with AI, it's going to give you that experience. You might not get the paycheck that you were getting at a bank or a telco, but exactly, you will get a lot more experience, which is going to be that invaluable experience.
That would be invaluable. And that's maybe the more aggressive advice, but I would definitely say that to any kind of young people who are starting out now, like really prioritize getting one of those AI native jobs, ideally, or at least AI first. And the distinction between those two is that AI native is a company that was started with the goal or with the thought that everything we do will be infused by AI. AI first is a company that's a little bit similar to like the mobile first that was maybe 10 years ago idea, that well, we know there are other things as well, but AI will be like our priority. So that's, which is great. And you cannot really expect only to have new companies in the world. I mean, there's a lot of old companies, but those old companies that have smart management have changed to be AI first. And so those will be the two places. If you are new and getting a new job, go there as if at all possible. People already have a job. I would say it's a more aggressive piece of advice, but honestly, yeah, to really future-proof your career, that's what you should consider doing as well.
Now, you mentioned companies having a bit more flat structures. What are your thoughts on? We talked about like leadership positions potentially going away to a degree, and it being more hands-on. What do you think about like people coming into the design space now? So, graduating university, when they started the university course, life was different because that was probably more than 2 years ago before
Yeah.
ChatGPT. Now it's all like it's hard to get a job when you're a junior. What do you think that next step for them would be? Is just once again go find an AI native company?
Well, if you can, that would definitely be my advice. But the other thing is, I have to say that I know the job market is tough right now, but um, getting to do something, is super important because for the future again, it's that agency is actually a more important skill, a career skill, than the so-called hard skills, the specific, let's say, design tools and knowing how to make a good icon and knowing how to run a usability study or those type of things. Because AI will be doing those things in 5 to 10 years. So we have kind of an intermediate period. And now speaking to the more senior people or mid-career to late career people, they hopefully have great skills in those type of things. And so they do have an about 5 year period where those skills are still valuable, but they're going to be gradually less and less and less valuable as AI takes more and more and more of it. And for the new people, they probably, to be honest, have pretty bad skills because universities are bad at teaching the practical design skills. This is just a fact. And it
Yeah,
was always the case in the past. If you hire somebody, you're going to spend the first year of teaching them how to do the job. And that's why I'm saying it's a little bit of a waste to learn how to do the job in a manner that's going to go away very fast. And so for the really new people, um, I would say that it becomes that much more important to aim for. And you cannot necessarily go to a truly AI first company right now. There are not that many, but at least go to somebody who's like kind of enlightened, I guess, not
yeah.
in denial, that at least have some form of AI program or experimentation. And I think you can also, um, I mean, you should never, of course, lie in a job interview, but you can kind of play up, that hopefully you have experimented with these new abilities over the last year or two. I mean, I would hope so, right? And if not, now is surely the time to do it.
Definitely.
And I mean, there's a big debate or discussion about who are the best people actually to work in the AI era. And there are two different, and I don't actually really know the answer to this, but there are two schools of thought. And one is that it should be young people because they are not kind of biased by the old way of doing things. They're so-called AI native. Nobody's actually truly AI native because we've only had it for a few years. So nobody really had it when they were kids except the current kids. So in 20 years from now, that'll be very interesting. But we don't have truly AI native people. We have at least young people who are kind of very much AI immersed and not kind of polluted almost by old thinking. So that's one school of thought. Just get all these young people and you don't have to retrain them. And the other school of thought is that AI actually benefits from existing skills and particularly judgment because AI will present you with lots of ideas, but you have to choose between them. And also, so AI requires agency. You have to tell it what to do, and judgment. And judgment is something you can't really teach. You kind of evolve it by experience. And so the other school of thought, and I personally maybe lean more towards that, is that because of the need for judgment, it's actually better to have more senior people take on these AI projects than completely new people. I mean, probably the real answer is you got to have if you have both, right? But anyway, if you are young, you can play up that benefit of young people because
I think,
there's a benefit to not having been bogged down by the old school of doing things.
yeah, I definitely think in the short term, so the next 2 or 3 years, having quite a lot of experience in design or any field per se, and being able to work with AI because it isn't where it needs, where it will be
Right.
yet. So being able to direct it, make sure it's doing the right thing, and the output's what you actually expect or want. Because 2 years ago, right, the hallucinations were terrible. You'd get
Yeah.
something back, but it is way better now. They've ironed out those things, and give it another year, it'll be doubly as good. So it's like having that experience is definitely going to help. Now, going, I guess, into maybe AI native companies that are starting up, like where do you think design is going to have the biggest impact for them? Because once again, I run a design consultancy, so I'm looking at enterprise going, that used to be where I put all of my staff, but it's probably going away. So now how do I look at startups and small businesses? Like where do you think design is going to play the biggest role in those types of businesses?
Yeah,
Because it's going to be more accessible, right?
it will. And I mean, I think all of the different stages of the design life cycle are all important, which is why we have them. But I actually think that the most important is probably kind of a discovery phase or figuring out what should be done. Again, it goes back to this point about the agency. So a new company, what should they do? I mean, and one of the sort of old school arguments is you should kind of develop something that you want or need for yourself. And that's okay. I mean, that is a way to get something that some people at least will want. But we have to remember that the people who start companies and work in these startup companies are not very representative of the bigger world or the bigger customer base. And so figuring out what customers need that is a user experience skill. And we have existing methods for doing it. And these methods can be accelerated with AI and maybe 10 years from now done quite differently. But even just now, we know how to do it. And so that I feel is where we can make a very, very big difference is that we can basically say, do not go in this direction, go in this direction, right? And we can do it based on data. And that's something that other people in those companies typically are not really great at doing. And that's something that we actually know how to do. Then once you decide what direction to go in, then of course, obviously you need to have good usability of what you're developing, and it's got to have all the different design qualities that we kind of know about already. So I feel those are also good contributions. But the biggest contribution is really that, because again, agency underlies everything. I mean, the world is being changed. I mean, it used to be it would run on inertia. And when I say used to, I mean, if you take a long view of history, it used to be that it was complete inertia in the sense that if a child is born, that child would do the same as the parents, like identically the same. So in each generation, there would be no change. Accumulate over 10 or 20 generations, you could see a small change. Now, that was the really old days. So more recently, like 100 years ago, so yeah, there would be new things coming in, but it will still be changing relatively slowly. But now we are in this extremely fast moving world. So inertia, how things used to be done, is kind of close to worthless. Whereas agency and being able to make things happen in new directions, that's what's defining the new world. And so then there is a new world. It is happening. And again, it's happening with or without you. I mean, so we only can decide we want to be part of that evolution. And some people lament that and say, oh, the good old days were so good. But first of all, I can give you a list of 100 things that were bad about the old days. But leave that aside, right? I mean, the only things like we will be able to like cure a lot of diseases, improve education, help people in developing countries get much higher standard of living. There's a lot of things of that nature that no AI will be able to do. And then there's also very pragmatic business things that we can do as well. They don't sound as grandiose, but are still, well worth doing. So all these different levels of change is accelerating. I mean, that's there's a good old saying, the only constant is change, but it's not even true anymore because it's not a constant change, it's accelerating change.
Yeah, so what? I've run a business and I'm in both the fear and excitement stage the whole time because I'm like, I can see the benefit of AI because it obviously decreases my operational expenses. The output is way faster. But then there's the fear. It's like, I have human capital. I put them out on site with clients, but if they don't need as many people, I have less places to put my people. But I think obviously there is that slight, I guess, area where there's a bit of a gold rush because if you can position yourself, everyone's going to need design and it's going to be more accessible. It's just finding companies at the right stage and then sort of helping them on that journey, which is exciting, and educating.
educating him. And it's a different type of education than in the past because of this point about inertia is gone. Because we used to be able to say, oh, here are our best practices. Let me teach you how to do it. And now you have to more co-evolve with them or lead them along, so to speak, and evolve with them. But I do think that that level of outside expertise has a lot to bring to the table over the next 10 years. Maybe later, that's hard to say, but at least 5 to 10 years, because I mean, there's going to be this huge change over the next 5 years, but then a lot of bigger, slow moving companies, they can coast a little bit on their brand on inertia, despite me saying inertia is going away. If you're big enough, it's like a super tanker. When you're big enough, that inertia still has some weight behind it. And that means that they're changing more slowly because they, in some sense, they can afford to change more slowly because they have some movement on their side. But eventually, so this may be more like 10 years rather than 5 years. For smaller companies, it may be 5 years. For big companies, it may be 10 years. But it will happen. And of course, they will hopefully kind of recognize the need for this change faster, so they're not like 10 years from now everything is already changed and they have to like scramble. If they change faster, they can steer the ship better, and that's where they need that help. Not the help of people who come in like saying this is the 5 steps to what you do, but rather we have these kind of, we know roughly speaking, like do not do these things or do this type of thing, and then while we're doing that type of thing, we will find out the specifics of how it works for your organization, for your type of product or services, whatever they do. Because I do think that there's going to be a lot of specialization or differences in how things are done depending on the type of organization, big versus small, or type of customers that they have. I mean, those will all make difference in how we do it. But advice from people who have at least, who don't know how to do it, because nobody knows how to do it, but are kind of somewhat experienced, have some understanding, that will help a lot. That will accelerate this quite tremendously. So that's a good place to be in if you can be that person or that company that has that experience and that ability to help bring people along. Because a lot of it is change management. If people don't have any help, if they just sit there and wait for it to happen, it's not going to happen. I mean, as an agency will rule the world, and so you can help people in that.
Yeah. How do you train agency? Because you've said it quite a few times, and I agree. I've got people on my team who I try and pull along for the journey, and they just resist. And then there's others that are just like, "This is the coolest thing that I've ever seen." It's like, how do you build it in people?
I think to some extent it's probably a personality matter, and that's an issue. But it's kind of like it's always been the case that there's some types of people who are more rewarded than others. In the good old days, if you were strong, if you could throw the spear very fast, if you could kill a lot of animals, then it became, if you have very high IQ, you could think up a lot of abstract thinking was high, and so now it's going to be agency. And some people are smarter than others, some people are stronger than others, and some people are more agency than others. And the ones who have more, they will be the more valuable people. But that said, something like, let's say, going back to the hunter-gatherer era, I love talking about the Stone Age. That's my favorite age of the history. Well, you could still learn. I mean, some people are just better hunters than others, but you can still learn to be better. And same through, you can learn to be better at reading and writing and thinking and doing spreadsheet analysis and all. You can learn to be better. You cannot learn to be a genius, but you can learn to be better. And I do think the same is true with agency, that you can kind of train yourself to identify opportunities rather than to think that the world is happening to me. I mean, that's it's internal versus external mindset. Is the world happening to me, or is the world something I'm building? And the two extremes will probably never meet, but you can move people somewhat by explaining to them, right? No, this is not just happening to you. You can effect change on it. And let's go back and talk about what we could have done in the last project that would have made that change better. I think probably if we want to be really ultimate about it, long-term thinking about it, it's probably something that has to start with people like 4 years old or something like that. I mean, I think it had to be trained up very gradually as people mature. And so it's the best places for children, and that means that if you're a parent, you have to think about schools that actually have projects that encourages this type of agency, which is not change the world agency, but making things happen type of agency. I think that's going to be a very important educational element, that children are encouraged in that direction rather than encouraged to have the direction that says you're just going to sit and absorb, which was the old school kind of thinking in a lot of education systems.
There's actually a school in the US that's an AI first school, and they teach people, I think it's like 2 hours a day, and the rest is like functional stuff. And their kids are some of the smartest kids. Are
Yeah,
like they're rating higher than any other school, and they're only actually studying 2 hours a day.
that's true. But I mean, that's yet another phenomenon, which is because if you use AI for teaching, you can learn much faster because it's individualized. So it's going to not. I mean, if you have a human teacher who stands up in the classroom and is teaching a big group of kids, that teacher has to explain the same thing many times before everybody gets it, and some people probably don't get it at all anyway. But if it's individualized, right, the AI will figure out that you know Jonathan learns in this way and Susan learns in this other way, and explain it in a way that makes sense to each of them. And once one of them understands it, you're not going to have to explain it three more times. But then if you don't understand it, you do explain it three more times, and then you do get it, and then everybody can progress and learn at a pace that actually whatever is their capability. And so, yeah, you can actually be much more efficient in teaching, or actually efficient in learning, if you teach on an individual basis. This is, by the way, not news at all. We've known this for hundreds of years, that the best way of teaching is to have one tutor, one good teacher per student. It's just so expensive that it's not done, except for like the Duke of something or other used to do that for their children, right? But it wouldn't be the normal way of running a school system. But we can with AI, and so the benefit is that then you can learn the curriculum much faster than you could in the past, which leaves a lot of hours in the day for doing other types of things. And that doesn't mean that those other hours are wasted. It means that that's how you then acquire those other skills, like agency skills, judgment skills, persuasion skills, presentation skills, collaboration skills, a variety of things that people used to call them soft skills, which is kind of implied that they were secondary, but I actually don't think so. I think they've always been important, but now they're getting to be the most important.
Yeah, I agree. Circling this back to your career, right? Like if you're a designer and you use AI, you're becoming maybe 30% more efficient. That 30% now is time you can spend on continuing to upskill on AI. So it's kind of hand in hand, helps you move forward faster. So it's kind of,
Oh, exactly. And we do know that some people, in something like hide their use of AI from their management, which is, I don't actually like that point, but you may have to do it in certain places if the management is sufficiently anti-AI. But yeah, you will be 30% more efficient. And so you can just say, wow, I'm just doing all these things. And yeah, well, my mid-journey made this, or, whatever. But, it's ChatGPT wrote this product plan for me, and I just spent 10 minutes, making sure it was right, which you do have to do. You do have to check it. But I mean, honestly, you can be much more efficient. We know that. And so that is a way that I know people in some companies do, is they just kind of hide what they're using AI, but they are using it. And that gives you those two benefits. That first of all, you gain experience with using AI. And secondly, you have the extra time freed up that you can then use for additional projects.
yeah. Now, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today, Jakob. If you are to part one message for designers, what would it be?
Well, we don't pine for the past. Enjoy the future, because it's happening anyway, and it's much better if you like it. And we can make it. That's the last point, right? Because it's not something that's happening to us. It's something we are building. We just haven't been building it enough, if we want to be honest, for the last few years. But we should embrace that. We should embrace it for two reasons, very selfish, for our own sake. That's the only way you're going to have a job in 5 years. But also for the sake of humanity, which is honestly kind of like, at least for me, like why I got into user experience. I wanted to make computers to be suitable for humans, rather than humans have to like bow down for the mighty technology. and we're just at the next level of that, and we can absolutely make it happen. So that is honestly my main message is go back to, I mean, agency. I know I've said it like a million times already in this podcast, but that is the thing. Embrace agency, embrace that you can build the world, the new world, and it is going to be so much better if we do it right.
I agree. My takeaway from it is agency. I'm glad that I've got a bit of agency, so it's just a skill I'll keep working on.
Good. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Well, the word has multiple meanings, but it's not random, right? That the same word is used for these two things, even though they have slightly different meanings. There's also a good overlap. You're exactly right.
Now, if anyone wants to follow you, you have a newsletter, UX Tiger. It's incredible. I've been reading up on it quite a lot and love it. So is that the best way for anyone to follow you? You're also obviously a bit of a social media guru on LinkedIn as well. So what's the best way?
I think I really would well, all of them are nice, but I would really recommend subscribe to the newsletter, because then it just comes in your inbox every week, and you don't have to worry about it. You just get it. So I would say subscribe to my newsletter, and you go to the uxtigers.com website, and to the bottom of the page, or maybe you put a link in one of the descriptions. But yeah.
Easy done.
Subscribe to the newsletter. Newsletters are the oldest technology on the internet, but it's still the best for just keeping up with what's going on.
To be honest, I hate email newsletters, but I do enjoy yours. So I'll chuck a link in the podcast show notes so anyone can quickly find it and sign up. But once again, it's been such a great conversation. So thank you so much for jumping on.
Great. Well, thank you too.
Thank you. Thanks for watching. Now remember, please hit subscribe. And if you could leave us a like and a comment, it helps people like yourself find the video.